Thank you, Anthony. Those were great remarks to kick off the conference. And with that, we're excited to get our first panel up here. If you all want to come take your seats, I'd like to introduce the moderator, Tami Overby. Tami is a partner at the DGA Group, and she is also an advisor with us at the National Bureau of Asian Research. We have worked closely with Tami for many years and always appreciate her insight. Prior to her current role, Tami spent over 20 years in South Korea, where she spent over a decade as the president of AmCham Korea. And then when she returned to the US, she led the US Chamber of Commerce's Asia practice and was the president of the US Korea Business Council. So really a wealth of knowledge here, and I will let Tami introduce the other panelists. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Doug. Thank you all for joining us today here at NBR. We have a very timely discussion for you with the first panel, and I've got a group of rock stars here. And I'm going to ask their patience because I'm not going to go through each of their very impressive CVs, but I'm sure you can download it somewhere. So I'm just going to hit the highlights. I'll start with Ambassador Robert Holliman. Ambassador Holliman is a senior fellow for trade and digital policy here at NBR. And he led the Crowell and Mooring International. He was president and CEO while also being a partner with Crowell and Mooring, the law firm. He also served as deputy U.S. trade representative from 2014 to 2017. And in that capacity, he was responsible for U.S. trade investment relations in Asia and global trade policy in the area of services, investment, intellectual property, and innovation. And to his right is my dear friend, Ambassador An Ho-young. Ambassador An served as a career South Korean diplomat. He's also a member of NBR's board of directors. He's currently chair professor of North Korean studies at Kyungnam University, having previously served as president of the University of North Korean Studies. My friend has a 4-decade diplomatic career. He also served as South Korea's ambassador to the United States. He was first vice foreign minister of foreign affairs and trade. He was also Korea's ambassador to the EU and Belgium, deputy minister of trade. He was President Lee Myung-bak's Sherpa for G20 and G8. And to his immediate right is Ambassador Henry Bensurto. Ambassador Bensurto serves as the Consul General of the Republic of the Philippines here in Seattle. He was also ambassador to Turkey and had previously served as general counsel in San Francisco. He is an expert in West Philippine Sea Center and on the UN Convention of Law of the Sea. And then we have Professor Daisuke Kawai. He is director and project assistant professor for Economic Security Policy Innovation Program at the University of Tokyo. He holds positions at Keio SFC Institute at Keio University, the Center for Strategic and Japanese Studies at Ketsu University, and the Center for International Private Enterprise. Professor Kawai is an expert in Japan's foreign policy and economic security, with a special interest in critical and emerging technologies, and is a non-resident fellow here at NBR. And with that, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give 5 or 6 minutes of comments, and we'll go down the line. And then I'll ask a couple of questions, but I hope to quickly turn to the audience because I'm sure your questions are better than mine. And with that, we'll go with Ambassador Holliman.
Good morning. Thank you, Tami, for that introduction to the panel. And I particularly want to thank National Bureau of Asian Research for sponsoring this overall conference. I had the privilege to be here last year and delighted to be back here in Seattle for this, and thank them for all the great work that they do. Also want to recognize Microsoft and K&L Gates. I had the privilege to represent Microsoft for many years when I ran the Business Software Alliance. and K&L Gates was also one of my law firms that I respected enormously on technology policy issues. So it's a privilege to be here today. Let me give a couple of quick overview remarks from a U.S. perspective, which is what I was asked to do today. And let me just say that I think there are kind of four things that I think that are driving the U.S. view around technology policy, collaboration, and in some points friction at this point in time. One is the broad issues around trade, of which technology is a part, but technology is only a part of that. Two, when we drill down on trade and digital, it's looking at the issues around digital discrimination and breaking down barriers to digital trade. Third is how the U.S. is looking at national security and economic security as it relates to technology. And finally, I'll conclude with a couple of thoughts around cooperation. So we are almost a year away from President Trump announcing Liberation Day, which was his Liberation Day that imposed a whole series of reciprocal tariffs against virtually every trading partner in the United States. I won't go into the merits or lack thereof of that strategy, but it is a fundamental part, as everybody in this room knows, of how the Trump administration is looking at trade, the exports and imports from the United States, and it certainly impacts technology, even if it is not primarily technology policy driven. Since that announcement, we've had a couple of things that have happened. The biggest one was that in February of this year, the United States Supreme Court held that the legal mechanism that the Trump administration was using to impose those tariffs was invalid. And what that caused is the Trump administration to put in a series of new ways of imposing tariffs to try to accomplish the same objective, which is to raise tariffs on trading partners that they had attempted to try through a 1977 statute. This is relevant for two reasons. One is that there are some temporary tariffs that are in place that are at 10% on basically every country in the world for almost every good. But the Trump administration has also launched a series of 301 investigations, which is Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. These to date, and these are all designed to identify barriers that the U.S. believes exist in trade as a means of imposing tariffs on that trade. So the initial two 301 investigations from USTR relate to forced labor concerns, and that addresses 60 countries. Second is structural overcapacity in areas that could include things like semiconductors and manufacturing, which is another 16 countries. And coming, as most people believe, in the next couple of weeks, will be a broad-based 301 investigation around digital trade barriers. And I dare say that that will probably hit virtually every country in the Indo-Pacific region. And those will be ways of both identifying the barriers, but also a mechanism to impose tariffs on a whole range of products based on the discrimination that the U.S. government identifies. So trade, digital trade barriers, more to come. Secondly, what do we know about digital trade barriers? Well, we know that they are substantial. And the United States has identified annually through the National Trade Estimate, the newest of which will come out within days, if not weeks, a whole series of barriers where the view is that U.S. tech companies are discriminated against in their trade in foreign countries. They include things like data localization laws, limits on cross-border data transfers, discriminatory treatment of digital services, cybersecurity and digital regulations that are burdensome, and digital taxes. And I'll use a great example here, which is The U.S. House Judiciary Committee has recently launched an investigation about how Korea is regulatory treating Coupang. So Coupang is a U.S.-based company based here in Singapore. There'll be more discussions this afternoon around Korea, but I'll say that they are the largest U.S. investor in Korea. They're the second largest employer in the United States, in Korea, and they're in e-commerce and technology. And the asserted discrimination by Korea and its regulatory structure is something that has not only caught the attention of the White House and the Trump administration, but Capitol Hill. Leave it to others to discuss the various details on it, but those are the types of digital discriminations that the U.S. is looking at and is likely to ramp up in 301. And let me just conclude by saying there's a whole series of national security, economic security, trade-related issues, the biggest of which is the U.S. has identified for a long time now that the U.S. doesn't manufacture enough semiconductors and semiconductor equipment to meet U.S. needs, and that there are huge vulnerabilities in the existing supply chains, particularly vis-a-vis the dependence on Taiwan. The Biden administration had a whole series of things called the CHIPS and Science Act, which was a bipartisan bill to try to get more investment in the United States. Trump administration, including President Trump, in January of this year identified the barriers after a Commerce Department review and believes that tariffs or exclusions from tariffs are a way of trying to deal with those capacity issues. And so that will continue to animate the U.S. debate on technology policy. And finally, I'll just say as a preview that on cooperation, I think we have a number of great examples. Going back to October of last year, we have both the U.S. technology prosperity deals with Japan and also with Korea. There are a lot of elements around cooperation on AI, quantum computing, as Anthony was talking about, kind of workforce development, particularly in relation to Japan and AI standards. And I'm happy to drill down into those, but I want to put out that also that ray of hope that there are these concrete efforts that are happening with the U.S. and our trading partners, even as we try to work through the frictions that inevitably exist, but which I'm confident can be resolved satisfactorily. Thank you.
Ambassador An?
Well, thank you. Well, as a matter of fact, Ambassador Holliman, he made 4 points. And then I have to tell you, when I used to be ambassador in Washington, D.C., then of course I have had the pleasure of working very closely with Ambassador Holliman. And then I have to tell you, this in fact is happening today, in the sense that because of our, well, having worked together in Washington, D.C., we didn't coordinate, but at the same time, Ambassador Holliman made 4 points, and then I'm going to make 3 points, and all of my 3 points would in fact very narrowly focus upon the 4th point of Ambassador Holliman. So that in fact is a kind of uncoordinated coordination between Ambassador Holliman and me. Right.
Well done.
Well done. Even before I began. Right. So my 3 points. My first point, well, as a matter of fact, my first point is a kind of confession I have to make. And the confession is, well, my favorite pastime. What do you think my favorite pastime is? You may be surprised and you don't believe it. My favorite pastime is to read think tank reports.
Oh my.
Including NBR reports. But at the same time, the think tank report that I'm going to share with you today is a report which was published by Council on Foreign Relations last year, at the end of last year, which is U.S. economic security. And I really liked it. I really liked that report. And then the reason why I liked it so much was because, first, it in fact showed in very graphic ways the nature of challenge we have in technology. Secondly, that report in fact emphasized the importance of cooperation. Cooperation, especially with large number of allies and partners, in particular Korea. So that in fact is the reason why I like that report in particular. And what I have to tell you is, this is something which is already happening. That is to say, close cooperation between Korea and United States, as well as multilaterally. That, in fact, is already happening. Ambassador Holliman, he already talked about something called MOU on technology prosperity. So that was concluded in October when President Trump came to visit Korea and Japan in October last year. 2 months later, then again, United States invited Korea and Japan and 6 more countries to come and form something called Pax Silica Initiative. And that Pax Silica Initiative is very narrowly focused upon supply of semiconductors, semiconductor equipments, and materials. 2 months later, in February this year, then again, United States started another government process, which is called Forge Initiative. In Forge Initiative, United States invited 54 countries, and this Forge Initiative is very narrowly focused upon supply chain issues, especially critical minerals. And Korea was invited to continue to serve as a chair country for the Forge Initiative because Korea used to serve as a chair country for something called Mineral Security Partnership. So by making Korea as a chair country for this new initiative, Forge Initiative, with United States Department of State, it wanted to ensure that there's continuity between Mineral Security Partnership and Forge Initiative. So this, in fact, these 3, in fact, are examples of government-to-government efforts we are making in order to further strengthen cooperation. But in my mind, and I think a large number of you would agree, what is important is, well, what should happen in the real world? That is to say, in the private sector. That, in fact, is where, the real tangible benefits would be made. So that will be my 3rd point. And again, when it comes to, say, what in fact is happening in the real world, well, a lot of things are happening. But at the same time, the reason why I'm going to focus upon this issue is because unless you know what is available by each partners, then of course you wouldn't wonder what should be the focus of the cooperation. And when it comes to, say, what Korea has to offer, of course, Korea has a lot to offer. So as an example, let me just try to focus upon AI. And United States, of course, is an unquestioned leader on AI. But at the same time, upstream and downstream, there are a large number of barriers. There are a large number of, say, challenges United States faces. And I dare say, Korean companies, Korea is a nation, and Korean companies, they have a lot to offer in order to work with the United States to deal with those challenges. So upstream, earlier this morning, then Mr. Cook, Anthony Cook, he talked about semiconductors, he talked about energy, he talked about, say, critical minerals, and Korea, in fact, has a lot to offer with respect to those barriers. Semiconductors, I don't have to explain any further in the sense that you know Samsung, you know Hynix, so that those companies are there. But when it comes to energy, then of course, well, Korea doesn't produce any fossil fuel, but at the same time, Korea has consortiums which in fact can build nuclear reactors on time, on budget. And then I don't think there are too many, say, companies or countries which can say, I can build nuclear reactors on time, on budget. Korea is one of the very few countries who can say that. So that, in fact, was an example of how Korea can work with the energy issue. And when it comes to critical minerals, then you'll be scratching your head. Korea producing critical minerals, we don't have too much resources when it comes to critical minerals. But at the same time, the world's largest smelter of non-ferrous metals, do you know what that largest smelter of non-ferrous metal is? I think Tami does. There's Korea Zinc. There's a Korean company, and it is the largest smelter of non-ferrous metals. And Korea Zinc, in fact, recently announced it will make new investment in a place called Clarksville in Tennessee. That will be $8 billion. So $8 billion is a large amount of money. But at the same time, what is even more important is Department of War, U.S. Department of War, and U.S. Department of Commerce are going to be co-investors in the investment. So when the two U.S. departments are participating, then I think you can guess why they are participating in this Korea Zinc investment. So that's what Korea has offered when it comes to upstream. But when it comes to downstream of AI, then of course there should be manufacturing, there should be robotics, there should be research. And again, Korea, in fact, you know about Korean manufacturing, you know about Korean robotics. So again, Korea has a lot to offer when it comes to all those, say, both upstream and downstream, say, activities for AI. And I could continue with quantum, with biotechnology, but for the sake of time, let me just stop here. But at the same time, Ambassador Holliman, I'm so glad that you talked about those 4 points, and your fourth point was on cooperation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ambassador Ron. Now we'll move to Ambassador Bensoto from the Philippines. Sir.
Thank you, Tami. And first, I'd like to express my humble gratitude to NPR, to Michael, Tami, and also my gratitude for being part of this distinguished panel. Mine is a quaint voice. Hopefully, I should be able to give justice in terms of the topic that I was given. Continuing, I will start with a disclaimer. Since I fused my own personal analysis of what I thought is the Philippine perspective, I will therefore invoke a qualified Chatham House rules, which means that if I speak the correct things, then it's my government's position. If I say the wrong thing, it's my individual personal responsibility.
Fair enough.
That said, I hope to approach this by giving you an idea of the strategic vision of the Philippines as a chair, in line with the ASEAN strategic vision. And from there, I'll try to discuss certain principles that I think should govern or governs the policy approach. And from there, I will now therefore speak about what are the policy priority areas. And from there, I will conclude. So let me to perhaps exercise discipline in terms of the time, I will stick to my script. I think to begin with, I think it's important for us to understand the global landscape nowadays. And I think many have already discussed that, but I just want to point out that at the time when the global landscape is being reshaped by rapid technological transformation, our region stands at a crucial juncture, at a critical juncture. The Indo-Pacific is not only an engine of economic growth, it has become the arena where the rules of digital governance, the direction of innovation ecosystems, and the future of inclusive development are being actively shaped. For the Philippines, this moment calls for a clear and principled approach, one that ensures that technology serves and empowers our people, strengthens our economies, and contributes to a stable and rules-based regional order. What, therefore, is our strategic vision in this context? As ASEAN Chair, the Philippines reaffirms its commitment to ASEAN centrality and to a rules-based, open, inclusive, and resilient Indo-Pacific. We view technology and innovation not merely as tools for economic growth, but as strategic enablers of economic resilience, societal well-being, sustainable development, and regional stability. Our vision is anchored on people-centered, secure, trusted, and human-focused digital transformation across the region, where no one is left behind. Allow me to outline, therefore, the guiding principles which I think shapes the Philippine approach. First is inclusivity and equitable access. While our region has made significant strides in digital transformation, gaps remain between urban and rural communities, between large enterprises and MSMEs, and across different segments of society. As ASEAN chair, the Philippines will advocate for bridging the digital divide, ensuring that innovation does not only reach, but should also serve micro, small, and medium businesses, women, youth, and marginalized communities. Digital transformation must be a force for empowerment and inclusion, not exclusion. Second principle, human-centered and ethical innovation. Technological advancement must be guided by values. It must respect human rights, uphold data privacy, and promote trust. In this regard, the Philippines supports regional efforts to advance responsible artificial intelligence, ethical data governance, and secure digital ecosystems. The Philippine policy priority for artificial intelligence is clear: to ensure that AI is developed and deployed responsibly, inclusively, and in ways that preserve human-centric governance. Accountability should remain central in advancing innovation. Third, ASEAN centrality and unity. ASEAN must remain at the center of regional cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. We underscore the importance of ASEAN centrality, solidarity, and unity as the foundation upon which we sustain a rules-based and future-ready community. Our strength lies in our ability to convene, to build consensus, and to ensure that cooperation is inclusive and balanced. We will continue to strengthen ASEAN-led mechanisms, including our digital cooperation frameworks, as primary platforms for engagement with our partners. Fourth principle, openness, interoperability, and security. A thriving digital economy requires an environment that is open, yet secure, interoperable, competitive, and inclusive. The Philippines supports greater cooperation in cross-border data flows with trust, cybersecurity capacity building, and digital infrastructure connectivity. Our goal is a regional digital ecosystem that is both resilient, secured, and worthy of the trust of our peoples. From these principles, therefore, what are the priority areas for cooperation? First is the digital economy and innovation ecosystems. We aim to strengthen regional innovation ecosystems by supporting startups and innovation hubs, promoting cross-border e-commerce, and enhancing digital payments interoperability. On this aspect, the Philippines commits to work together with fellow ASEAN member states to deliver the signing of the ASEAN Digital Economy Framework Agreement, or DEFA, this year in November. DEFA is envisioned as the most comprehensive regional agreement in ASEAN, covering the digital economy and commerce, and aims to deepen digital integration and create opportunities for enhanced interoperability, cross-border data flows, and digital trade and innovation-driven partnerships to ensure the region collectively benefits from the full potential of the digital economy. Second priority, emerging technologies. Emerging technologies, particularly artificial intelligence, are reshaping industries and societies. On artificial intelligence, ASEAN has introduced and adopted the ASEAN Responsible AI Roadmap 2025 to 2030. This is the roadmap that we'll follow in the next 5 to 6 years, and the ASEAN Guide on AI Governance and Ethics, which we passed in 2024. The Philippine chairship of ASEAN considers AI as a cross-cutting priority across the 3 pillars of ASEAN. First, peace and security. Second, economic and socio-cultural. Third, the Philippines will champion the safe, ethical, responsible, equitable, and sustainable adoption of AI and the development of AI-driven solutions in all of these areas. One specific project that the Philippines will pursue actively is the establishment of a working group on AI for health research and development in ASEAN to enhance understanding, engagement, and overall regional collaboration. Third priority, cybersecurity and digital trust. Trust is the bedrock of a thriving digital future. We must strengthen regional cooperation to address cyber threats, online harms, and disinformation. The Philippines will support enhanced information sharing mechanisms, joint exercises, and capacity building programs to build a secure digital environment. Fourth priority is the digital skills and workforce development. Technology is only as powerful as the people who use it. We must invest in our human capital by strengthening workforce capabilities through advanced reskilling, industry-aligned training, regional mobility, and foresight-driven talent planning. Fifth priority is the innovation for sustainable development. Technology must ultimately serve people and advance the broader public good. Based on this, the Philippines hope that we will be able to strengthen all of these through partnerships with the United States, with Japan, with South Korea, with Australia. We encourage partnerships that support technology transfer, infrastructure development, and innovation capacity building. We will continue to work closely with the private sector, academic institutions, and innovation networks. To conclude, in closing, the Philippines envisions ASEAN that leads with innovation, stands strong in resilience, and places people at its core, where technology is not merely a driver of growth, but a force that upholds human dignity, expands opportunity, and advances prosperity for all. We aim for a rules-based, outward-looking region that enjoys lasting peace and stability and is more resilient to emerging threats, including climate and disaster risk. And an Indo-Pacific where cooperation is guided by mutual trust, international law, and a shared commitment to sustainable progress. As this year's chairman of ASEAN, the Philippines stands ready to work with all partners to realize this vision. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to our baseball reference, our cleanup hitter, Director Kawai.
Thank you very much, Tami-san, and thanks as well to LBR, Michael, Doug, and Jonathan for convening this timely discussion. So it is a real privilege to join such a distinct panel. And as only non-ambassador here, I feel I should speak both briefly and carefully. From Japan's perspective, the technology innovation cooperation in the Indo-Pacific is no longer just about growth and competitiveness in the traditional sense. It is increasing about the resilience and the strategic trust and the future shape of the regional order. So the question today is not simply who develops the most advanced technology first. The bigger question is who can build a trusted ecosystem around those technologies. The ecosystem that are secure, resilient, and open enough to support innovations across the region. From Japan's point of view, the three realities now shape this environment. First, the line between economic policy and security policy has become much thinner. When we talk about sometimes semiconductors, AI, space, quantum, advanced materials, or subsea cables, we are no longer talking about purely commercial domains. These technologies increasingly shape strategic leverage, resilience, and even deterrence. Second, interdependence is not a disappearing, but the quality of the interdependence matters much more than before. For many countries in the region, the issue is no longer whether to remain economically connected. The real issue is whether those connections are trusted, diversified, and resilient enough to withstand disruption, coercion, or geopolitical shocks. The third, the principles alone are not enough. We often speak about the free and open Indo-Pacific, trusted supply chains, or rule-based cooperation, but those principles still matter, but unless they are backed by investment, industrial capacity, talent, and real coordination, they remain more aspiration than strategical. So against this backdrop, Japan's own priorities can be understood in three broad terms. The first is to strengthen Japan's strategic indispensability. Japan does not need to dominate every frontier technology domain, but it does need to remain indispensable in the key parts of the ecosystem, especially in the semiconductor, manufacturing equipment, advanced materials, precision components, robotics, and other high-value industrial capabilities. The second priority is resilience. Innovation without resilience is no longer enough. Japan is increasingly focused to supply chain security and the research security, infrastructure protection, and the broader economic security foundation that allow innovation to endure under stress. The third priority is a practical cooperation with allies and trusted partners, as every ambassador mentioned. Japan understands very clearly that it cannot build secure and competitive technology ecosystem alone. The cooperation is not optional, it is essential. So when Japan looks at the Indo-Pacific technology agenda, I would suggest 4 concrete areas where cooperation should be deepened. The first, semiconductors and the broader advanced electronics ecosystems. This is not only about the fabricate leading-edge chips, but it is about building trusted semiconductor ecosystem across the value chain, manufacturing equipment, materials, testing, packaging, the talent development, and the supply chain visibility. Japan has particularly strengthened in many of these enabling technologies, and the regional objective should not be isolated national champions. So it should be trusted semiconductor ecosystems. The second, AI, data, and digital governance. From Japan's perspective, the question is not only how to innovate faster, it is also how to deploy AI more safely, more reliably, and more productivity across society and industries. I know the current American administration focuses on much faster innovation rather than having guardrails. But for many countries in the Indo-Pacific, the real opportunity lies not only in frontier model development, but in practical applications in manufacturing, logistics, healthcare, disaster response, and the public administration. That means cooperation should include not only research and capture, but also standards, testing, assurance, and the trusted cross-border data framework, as Ambassador Henry mentioned. And the third, the maritime communication and the infrastructure. This is especially important in the Indo-Pacific because this is a maritime domain region defined by sea lanes, ports, cables, logistics corridors, and strategic choke points. So technology cooperation should include subsea cable security, trusted telecom networks, ports and logistics, digitalization, satellite-enabled maritime domain awareness, and cyber protection for critical infrastructure. For countries such as Japan and the Philippines in particular, the resilient digital and the maritime infrastructure is central to both economic security and the strategic stability. The fourth, the startups, university, and the dual-use innovation networks. Across the Indo-Pacific, many governments now recognize that technological advantage will increasingly come from ecosystems that connect universities, startups, established firms, investors, and the public institutions. Japan has world-class research and deep industrial capabilities, but like many countries, it still faces challenges in translating research into rapid commercialization and strategic deployment. So one of the most promising areas for regional cooperation is the building stronger networks for joint research, venture cooperation, talent mobility, and the dual-use innovation. But of course, none of this is easy. So industrial policy is intensifying across the region. Export controls and investment screening are expanding. The research security concerns are rising. And the changes in the US trade and technology policy create both opportunities and uncertainties for many Indo-Pacific partners. But the answer to these difficulties is to not less cooperation. It is smarter cooperation. So what we need are more trusted forms of interdependence that is diversified, resilient, and rooted in practical collaboration. So Japan, the way forward is not simply to talk more about cooperation, but to operationalize it through the trusted innovation network, joint projects, co-investment, the talent partnership, and the real supply chain coordination. Let me conclude with this. For Japan, the central question is not whether the Indo-Pacific needs more technology and innovation cooperation. It clearly does. The real question is whether we can build a trusted, resilient, and practical regional innovation ecosystem before fragmentation, coercion, and the mistrust being to outpace cooperation. So I believe we can, but only if we treat technology cooperation not as a side conversation, but as one of the central strategic tasks of our time. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. I'll start out with the first question for all of the panelists, but then we'd like to turn to the audience. So please have your questions ready. So a lot has shifted in the Indo-Pacific over the last year, including a very different U.S. approach to technology strategy. We've seen rapid developments in AI and evolving U.S.-China tech competition. I'm curious, what stands out to you as the most significant development from the past year? Whomever would like to go first. Ambassador On? I think Ambassador Hollyman, it's up to you.
Sure. I think it's interesting that when you said China, I'm not sure that anybody had mentioned China on this panel yet. And of course, that I think not only for the United States, but for every country that's represented on this panel, that kind of really stands out as a huge part of how this all plays out. Certainly, many of the U.S. initiatives are with a focus on ensuring U.S. competitiveness or U.S. competitiveness with our partners vis-a-vis China, which I think we could all assume is the second largest leader in AI and technology development in the world. What are the sort of partnerships that we can have to address that? But it's also addressing the vulnerabilities. Certainly a lot of the concerns about semiconductor reliance upon Taiwan. has a China-related concern. And that is also what's driving part of these partnerships as well. And finally, I will say, since President Trump is going to be in China in May, I think while I'm not part of the Trump administration, I think I would, from everything I've read that they've said, I think they're also trying to look at areas of cooperation where they can exist. And I think that's important to do, even where you have differences, to find areas of cooperation. So China, I'm glad it came up. And I think the U.S. And our partners are always aware that that is one of the central driving points in these discussions.
Ambassador On, your thoughts, please?
Well, Tami, your question was the changes from last year to this year. And I wish to make several points. First point is between China and United States. I think many of you would say, well, China, in fact, it stands for continuity. Well, continuity in the sense that President Xi, he came to power in 2012 or 2013. And then even before that, being from 1949, I think in a sense, China as a nation has been on a 100-year marathon to catapult China into a leader of international relations. So China has been very consistent. That will be the impression you have. But at the same time, when it comes to United States, and especially the relations between United States and China, where US policy toward China, you would assume, has changed quite significantly. So let me just try to think about the importance of Trump presidency. One, the first Trump presidency that started in 2017. And in that year, 2017, then President Trump came up with his National Security Strategy report. And then in that report, President Trump, in a sense, presented the relationship between United States as a competition between free country and authoritarian country. So he called it strategic competition between free system and authoritarian system. It, in fact, was quite a change from the national security strategy of President Obama. So I remember I have been to something called Shangri-La Dialogue in 2018. And then it was the first Shangri-La Dialogue, which was held after President Trump's national security strategy. And throughout all the meetings, the Chinese delegation, they in fact were infuriated. So they were expressing their frustration, their anger about the way the President Trump presented the relationship between United States and China. And that, in fact, continued under President Biden, right? So President Biden, in his national security strategy report, he was describing the relations between United States and China as strategic competition between democracies and authoritarian states. So in a sense, pretty much a continuity between President Trump, the first term, and President Biden. And then President Trump came again for his second term. And then a large number of people guessed, maybe it will be continuation. That is to say, President Trump would continue with his, very vigorous attitude against the Chinese in his second term. That was everybody's guess. And then as a matter of fact, initially, that's how he started, by imposing 145% tariffs on China, for example. But he suddenly changed it, didn't he? Right? In April last year, then China responded by saying, okay, if you're imposing 145%, then we'll respond with the 145%. On top of it, we will stop exporting critical minerals to you, and we will stop importing, say, agricultural products from you. That, in fact, was the way China responded. That, in fact, was quite a change from how China responded to US pressures during President Trump's first presidency. So again, there was a change in President Trump's attitude toward the Chinese. So that, in fact, is a superficial impression we have between in the relationship between United States and China. But at the same time, what I believe is, if you look deeper into the undercurrent, then not too much has changed. I think if you read the national security strategy of President Trump, the second term, still there is an undercurrent about wariness, about concern, about the strategies, about China. So you can read it between the lines. The second strategy report, it doesn't talk about China. It doesn't talk about strategic competition. It doesn't talk about democracy and authoritarian states, etc., etc. But if you read between the lines, then there is deep concern about China. So, Tami, your question was change from last year. Right. And I think there was a change. But at the same time, if you really focus upon the undercurrents, there has been, continuity is a far more important factor than change.
An excellent nuanced answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ambassador Bensorto.
Thank you, Tami, and thank you to the two ambassadors. Tami, your question deserves a whole day. Actually, I think you need to have another conference to address that. But hopefully, in a nutshell, and here answering this, I will have to shed off my position and talk more as an academic, having worked on this issue, basically in the South China Sea as the chief negotiator, essentially once upon a time. I think last year has to be connected with the last 20, with the last 30 years. Things don't happen in a vacuum. Whatever changes we saw yesterday or last year was an offshoot of what happened 10, 20 years down the line. And so that analysis must not be limited to 1 year, but you have to look at it on a broader spectrum. What we have seen in essentially is the changing security, and that security landscape has impacted the use of technology. At the crux, there is a push and pull between rules-based order or rule of law and power politics, essentially. And at the middle is the question of technology. Technology by itself seems to have no value, but in the context of this power struggle, we saw the weaponization of technology as well. And therefore, subset issues like cybersecurity has come. Trust has become a fundamental issue. And in that context, we have seen how US policy has also changed in terms of, first, let me start with the South China Sea. Years ago, in 2012, I remember crying and shouting that we must work all together with my US counterparts and my Japanese counterparts. We have to work very hard in terms of rule of law. Because if we don't, this rule of law, what happens in one part of the world will happen in another part of the world. What happened in Ukraine is an offshoot of the South China Sea. What will happen in Taiwan is an offshoot of the Ukraine and now the Middle East, essentially. So they are so interrelated. And this is what we have seen. Before, technology is focused on the peaceful use. Suddenly now, there is now apprehension, anxiety. We've seen how technology has been weaponized in those sophisticated weaponry systems. Essentially, now the cable, undersea cable, where you see a lot. In 2012, at the Center for International Law, peace has been the focus already. And years after, now what had been discussed in 2012, 2010, is right at the forefront now of what's happening in the South China Sea. I think I will end there, essentially, because I cannot stop. It will take a whole day, essentially, to discuss those changes and how they will impact in the future. What is the end game? in terms of all these conflicts or disputes that's happening all over the world. And finally, as we analyze the changing landscape, what is the correct policy approach? And this is going to be an ongoing debate between rules-based, between appeasement and deterrence. So this is going to be a continuing discussion, and events that continues to happen on a day-to-day basis, we need to pay attention, essentially. Thank you very much.
And we'll give our final comment to Director Kawai.
If I had to highlight the important development on technology matters over the past year, I would make 3 points. The first of all, the AI race is no longer just about who has the best model. It is now clearly competition over the full stack, chips, compute, data centers, power, and industrial scale. So in that sense, AI competition is starting to look like less like a software race and more like a geopolitical contest over infrastructure. The second, we have seen the real strategic impact of lower cost and more open models coming out of China. DeepSeek was an important example because it changed the conversation from who has the most advanced frontier system to who can diffuse capable AI faster, more cheaply, and at scale. The third, the US-China competition is increasingly moving beyond the models themselves and into the rules of ecosystem, export control, across the advanced chips, model weights, and the trusted technology networks. So the key question now is not only who innovates faster, but who can build a more resilient and trusted AI ecosystem. And from Japan's perspective, that is exactly why this is no longer just a technology issue. It is an issue in national policy, economic security, and the regional order.
Thank you. We've got 5 minutes left, so let's turn to the audience. Who has a question for this august panel? Sir, in the back, could you stand? A microphone's coming to you. If you could briefly identify yourself and please make a concise question.
Hello, my name is Matthew Carpenter. I'm a Japanese linguist and consultant. I also used to be the United Nations reporter for Yomiuri Shimbun. My question is, it seems to be the takeaway, you want a trust-based regional order for that strategically enhances all the member states. Other than the security threat to Taiwan, what's the biggest challenge in the regional dynamic of the Indo-Pacific among allies that prevents this ecosystem from developing, would be my question. Thank you.
Great question. Who would like to start? Ambassador Holliman, don't make me whack you again.
So I think the biggest issues, certainly in the technology space, are going to be around what are the limits and barriers that are placed around some of the new AI technologies. And I think we heard from Ambassador Bensurto, sort of the principles that he wants in the Philippines and ASEAN wants to see applied to new AI models and how they're used. I think the US has some general frameworks on that, but the US is very much focused on getting out there as fast and moving as fast as possible. And the guardrails that the US wants to see are less well defined. The US is probably better off saying what they don't want to see. They don't want to see the states regulating it in a whole bunch of ways. Trump administration asked Congress to do certain things, but I think it may be some difference in principles of how various countries move forward.
Gentlemen, anyone else want to make a comment?
Well, Mr. Koo, he talked about trust, and Ambassador Bensuto, he talked about principles. And I think when it comes to trust, when it comes to principles, I think in the minds of almost all of us, the most important principle and most important factor to ensure there will be more trust would be preservation of rule of law. And so everybody is just nodding their head, right? Thank you for your agreement. Thank you for your support. But at the same time, if you read, I mean, when in my in my prior intervention, I talked about National Security Strategy Report. And then soon after that, US government came up with National Defense Strategy Report. And then there was a shocking sentence in the National Defense Strategy, which is, well, for what should United States use its military capability? Rule of law is cloud in the cloud castle. We will not use US capability for such cloud castle. And I was shocked to read that, because which country in fact came up with rule of law? It was United States. And it served the United States, it served each of our countries. When I say each of our countries, Korea, Philippines, Japan, and all the other countries represented in this room, where it served our interests very well. But at the same time, it served the interests of the United States in the first place. Who started it? Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Well, was he any sayer? Did it differ in any sense from his belief in United States first? I think he was also a believer in United States first. And then the reason why he in fact invested so much in order to strengthen and diffuse rule of law was because he knew rule of power, it will ruin United States. Because United States by 1945 was the strongest country in the whole world. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt knew United States as the strongest country in the world. If we continue with rule of power, there is no way United States could be free from another war, another tragedy, another huge casualty. He knew that. So that's the reason why he strengthened and diffused rule of law. So I very much hope that beginning from, well, each one of us gathered in this room, we will just go out and then spread the idea. We, United States and all the free world, we must stick to the rule of law. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one quick question. I'm going to go to the woman in the front. Sure.
Thank you, everyone. My name is May. I'm the Director General representing Taiwan Government Station here. I'm from Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Seattle. And I would like to think that Taiwan is constantly mentioned in this session. So I would like to add more information on this topic, particularly talking about the technology cooperation. I think in this room, Taiwan is the country, know more about the importance of cooperation, particularly on the technology side. So Taiwan is very open to working with all the countries. So I particularly agree with all the three ambassadors mentioned about the G2G cooperation in this field is particularly important. The United States and Taiwan have so many initiatives working on, so I'm not going to bore you with all these initiatives, but we also had the PAX Silica Declaration talking about to further strengthen the security of the supply chain, particularly on semiconductors and critical minerals. And we also have various dialogues working on that. And with Japan, we also have many other dialogues going on, particularly also with the Philippines. And the G2G conversation also works with the Korea. So it is really important, particularly in the Indo-Pacific area, that Taiwan stands in the key position in the supply chain of semiconductors. So working with all the countries is really important to us. And I particularly agree with the director from Japan, you just mentioned about that. To build, it is a lot, there are a lot of all those initiatives going on. And what Taiwan tries to do is that we like to further engage with each of the countries nearby and with the United States as well, because it is the most strongest, particularly in AI technology. Only with all of us, all the fellow democracies, we work together, we will create a more trusted ecosystem, particularly in AI, and that is the most important one. So my final conclusion is that Taiwan stands ready to work with all of you. So we would like to work with all the countries and all the partners here in this room and further engage to the world is the best way to secure the security, no matter on the military front, diplomatic front, particularly on technology front. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Please join me in thanking our panel.